So again, I'm Liza Cameron. I'm the president of New England Himss. I'm also the director for data and analytics, product support, demand and usability at Mass General Brigham. And I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight for New England Himss After Dark. We have a great panel of folks, as you can see, fun-loving bunch of people lined up for you tonight. And before I turn it over to Bob to give you a little more information about what tonight's going to look like and how this program is going to work, I just want to highlight a couple of upcoming events that we're having. So we're really excited. Starting next month, we are going to be getting back to in-person events. We do want to make sure that we're able to offer safe events for our attendees and for our volunteers. So we will be requiring proof of vaccination for our upcoming in-person events. But our next event is going to be held on Thursday, December 9th at Boston Winery. And that is a holiday social. So this is a networking event meant to bring us all back together for the first time in 2 years and to reconnect with our colleagues and celebrate the holiday season. Registration's open for that, so please sign up. Our next in-person event that we're planning is going to take place in January at Spinelli's in Linfield. So it's right on the Linfield Peabody line. And that is our Women in IT event. We're hoping to get registration open for that in the next day or two. So please stay tuned for that. But that's going to be a great event with some of our C-suite leaders talking about the rise to the leadership roles. And then just want to also highlight that we do have a virtual event that we're going to be offering CE credits for our nurses, nurse practitioners, doctors, PharmDs, and anyone else is obviously welcome to attend. That will be virtual on December 16th. That'll be a 3-hour event and we're offering 3 CEs. And again, that'll be virtually. So again, that's just a couple of our upcoming events. I know Bob's going to talk a bit more about the continuation of the After Dark series. And we have some other virtual events that we're planning that are on our website and registration's open. So please go to the website, take a look at what we're offering and sign up. With that, Bob, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Liza. Appreciate it. So welcome tonight to everybody attending, and I appreciate your participating in this event tonight. So a couple of housekeeping rules. First, if you have any questions, on the bottom of the screen, you will see a Q&A and a chat. Please do me a favor and stick the questions in Q&A, not in chat. But if you do put it in chat by accident, we will monitor that as well, but it will be easier if you can put it in the Q&A. So what we're going to do is we are going to have the first part of our evening will be our hiring panelists. Then the second part will be our recruiter panel. And then we're going to have a general discussion. That's when all of our panelists will participate and we will get to the questions that you guys ask. So just to let you know that we will get to them, but we're just going to hold off on them because we have a number of questions that we already had posed to our panelists initially, and we want to focus on those. And we appreciate any and all questions that you provide. So this is a continuation of what we did last year. We did a career advancement sessions last year. We did 4 of them. I believe they're all still on the website. They're available for to be watched. They all were recorded. This will record it as well. So if you want to share it with your friends, feel free to do so. Everybody who signed up tonight had the option of opting into a networking list. We did this last year. People were very happy to have it because it's tough networking during COVID. There's not a lot of in-person events. We haven't had an in-person event in a year and a half. So if you want to participate in that list and didn't opt in, just send me an email and we'll get that information out to you, and I'll put my email address in the Q&A later. So that's the first thing. Secondly, we have 3 additional career advancement activities, these After Dark programs that we're going to be running later on this year. One is on January 13th. One is on February 3rd, which is going to be our CIO panel, discussing basically how to get into the CIO track what it's all about, what are the CIO roles like, et cetera, from CIOs from different perspectives. And then our last event, which will be on April 28th, we'll be talking about clinical informatics and how to career opportunities in clinical informatics. So for those people who are clinicians who want to get an IT, et cetera, or those people who just want to find out about that area, certainly welcome to attend. Without any further ado, I'm going to do a quick introduction of who I am, and I'm also going to lead the next panel as well as the last panel, and then I'll let my panelists introduce themselves and we'll get into the questions. So I'm Bob Dichter, as I mentioned earlier. I'm a past president. These sessions are sponsored by the Past Presidents Club, which I am an esteemed member of, as well as my 3 panelists that are the hiring manager, as well as one of my panelists that's on the recruiters. So we got 4 past presidents tonight, plus myself. And Eliza, who will be a past president, come July. She's looking forward to that day. Although yes, she's shaking her head. All current presidents are looking forward to be a past president at some point. So I appreciate all my past presidents participating. So during the day job, I work for Versatile Health as VP of Digital Health and helping them grow their healthcare practice, as well as doing career coaching on the side. So career advancement is a strong area of focus for me, and anyone wants to network with me, feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to participate, or you want to link in with me as well, feel free to do that. I'm assuming most of my panelists will also be happy to accept LinkedIn requests, and they'll talk about that. So without further ado, Pete, you can go first, and then Rich Snyder, and then Rich Kubica.
Yeah, that sounds great. Past president, as you stated, and I'm just excited. It's great to be on the panel. I am calling in from Maine. I've spent 16 years weaving in and out of management consulting, so worked for Deloitte for a time, and life sciences, healthcare, IT. And I've been participated in partner hiring processes, as well as direct hiring of all different skill sets, levels, and I love the questions that were submitted. So thanks, Bob.
Excellent. So Rich Snyder, you're next.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Rich Snyder, past president. And I've been with Partners, Mass General Brigham, for 20 years now, coming up. And my official title is Director of User Experience and Training for what we call our digital health eCare team. And eCare is really the team that implemented Epic across the enterprise. On my team, I have folks that do instructional design, curriculum development. I have project managers. I have engineers, whether they be industrial engineers or computer science, et cetera. And so it's a pretty wide variety of people. And in the past, I've managed other teams as well across Mass General Brigham. And like Pete said, I got a chance to look at the questions. Really looking forward to some great dialogue with my esteemed colleagues, and hopefully we'll get to answer all of your questions tonight. So thanks for joining.
And Rich, you're last but not least.
Sure, I'm Rich Kubica. I am recently retired. However, my career spanned everything from direct supervision to being the Chief Technology Officer for Hartford Healthcare, the regional CIO for Hartford Hospital, and then, which may be of interest to some of you, I was transitioned from Hartford Healthcare, and then I became the interim CIO at the University of Rhode Island. So I've been keeping active in New England Himss. And again, if you want to hook up with me, that's fine.
So we'll kick off the questions. And so anybody who wants to take this, just raise your hand or shout out. No real organization to structure to that. So what do you look for in a candidate that would make them stand out?
Yeah. and I'm sure others want to jump in, but giving this some thought, and I read it two different ways, like just generally the candidate, and then kind of in reaction to the candidate. So I'll start with the latter, and what I mean is that that there's a good story associated to that candidate. I remember I interviewed a woman probably about a few months ago, and it was like a nonprofit example that she provided, and it was fantastic. And everyone, and this is for a project manager role, actually it was a customer support role. And you get a lot of candidates and their skill sets are transferable. And they may have, this project schedule they put together, which is great, and you're looking for that. But then the example, because you all go into a debrief afterwards, and it's like, oh yeah, and you may actually be interviewing 3-4 people within a week. So having that, that person stood out because of that kind of different project that they had, or that different opportunity. And then one more, which was just one word. And it's like, I think I inserted in a bunch of the questions coming up, but curiosity, like that is the ability to, you convey within the interview, but also just in different forms. Like, this person wants to know about us. This is someone I can sit and introduce to people at our company, and they're going to learn because I know they're going to ask, and that's going to be their approach. So quick thoughts off the cuff.
Yeah, it's funny. I was going to start with intellectual curiosity, right? So for me, by the time you're sitting, with either myself or somebody from my team, we pretty much know you can, if you don't have the actual skills, you can learn them. But it's really the questions that you're asking, the way you respond to questions that that are asked of you. Those are the things that I look for first. Second, and it's almost like a 1A, 1B kind of thing, not a 1 and a 2, is how are you going to get along with the team, right? So emotional intelligence is absolutely key. I can tell you personally that, over the course of my time at Mass General Brigham, I've worked with people who are fantastic with their technical skills, but you can't work with them because they just don't get it. And that can actually be detrimental to the work that everybody else is trying to do. On the other hand, you could have the other thing, but I feel like most times you can train somebody the skills, and that's why you're there in the first place. So.
Agreed. So what do candidates do that tends to make you sour on them?
Yeah, I'll either they're too verbose, which is tricky because a candidate during an interview is going to be in a spot where they have to expound upon who they are and what they've done. But if they're too verbose, and if they're not able to read the room, whether the in-person room or the virtual room, and they just drop to informal too quickly. And depending on your product, depending on your service, there should be some level of awareness of who they're interviewing with. And if they just quickly drop to informal.
Any additional comments from either of the Riches?
I think one of the things that tends to sour me is if somebody thinks they're too good, and their ego shows through, like it's just beaming out there. Because me, as we talked about emotional intelligence, the ability to work with others, you want to present yourself well, but you don't want to look like you're an egomaniac. So
100%. I think also, how prepared are you? Right. So oftentimes with the roles that we hire for now, I might say, can you bring in, some piece of data analytics work that you've done, right? Could you bring in a lesson plan that you've written and present it, right? Yeah. So, and I've had people come in, some show up with nothing at all, some not really able to speak to it. And a lot of Liza and I work together. A lot of what we do at Mass General Brigham is talk. We talk and talk and talk, and you need to be able to talk. So it's really interesting to see somebody present something on their own, and whether they do well or not with it. That can be a make or break as well.
Yeah, I mean, I noticed for myself, one of the first things I want to know is, do you actually have a curiosity, to Pete, your comment earlier, do you have a curiosity about the organization? Are you going to ask questions about the company and who you'd work with and what you'd be doing and why the company is even in existence? You know, I think your comment, Rich Snyder, is spot on. It's about fit. You know, are you going to fit in this company or not? And I think that's probably the biggest question, the biggest comment that I've heard. So the next one is it's a multi-parter. So I'm going to ask all parts. So give me a second to get them all out, and then, you know, feel free to sort of answer this how you want to. So what's really important? So what's important when you hire somebody? Is it skills, attitude, appearance? And not everybody is going to be great at all aspects of the hiring process. Pete, you just sort of mentioned, you know, some people being nervous. So between the resume and LinkedIn and skills and references, what are those things that you really sort of look at most importantly? And what are those things that you can sort of say, yeah, that's really not as important, and we can deal with some lesser, you know, skills or lesser, you know, marks in certain areas?
There's a lot in here. I saw that question, and you know, where to start. I mean, I think somewhere within here, I don't know if there's a hierarchy. I saw another question about interviewing. I mean, the bottom line is you got to interview well. I mean, and I know that sucks. Like, that's not an easy pill to swallow, but that can come in a bunch of different ways. Like, as a hiring manager, I've sat across from people who are nervous, and that's okay. I'm looking for, you know, the curiosity, not necessarily the level of confidence that they deliver it in that moment and that they warm up. And then, you know, I think Snyder, Rich mentioned it as well, but skills, I mean, there's some table stakes that are expected. But then yeah, I mean, if I'm looking at your LinkedIn profile and there's not all the skills I'm looking for that are filled out, we can train you on that. It is a lot more about those, the interview, and that is that's key. I'm gonna probably jump in with a few more. I'm trying to track with the approach. Sorry, one more, because I'm looking at what the question is: skills, attitude, experience, or something else. I think it's approach, because again, like, how do you learn? How do you approach conflict? How do you approach a new product when you're coming into a new company? And, you know, what is your approach? So again, just to wrap it up, what's your approach? And then if you don't think you interview well, or if you don't think you present well on paper, you know, give that some thought, get some feedback. How can you, you know, take a different lens to that?
Perfect. Anything else, either of my two Riches?
I think one of the things that I tend to do is I like to have people meet with multiple people on the team, right? Because again, we're a team with multiple personalities and multiple approaches, and that's good, right? You know, and so, you know, somebody might meet with me and be, well, I hope I don't make somebody nervous, but I can't imagine that happens. But might meet with somebody else on my team, like, and have a perfectly great conversation. And so we always do that, and then we always circle back and meet together to figure out, well, I didn't quite get that, I got that, you know. And if 2 out of 3 of us didn't get that, then we'll bring that person back in, right? So so that's one thing. It's not like, I guess it's not like a one and done, at least on my teams. So I think that's a big thing. Another thing that we always do is we always look at people's resumes, and we do look at their LinkedIn. And I will tell you that, you know, I've seen pictures on LinkedIn that they didn't pass the sniff test. I can tell you that much. And I didn't bring them in just because of the picture that they had on LinkedIn, because I'm like, oh my God, like, you know, so do pay attention to that.
In other words, LinkedIn is not the same as Facebook.
Right.
exactly. And some people think it is. So yeah.
We'll get to LinkedIn in a little bit. I'm sorry, anything else, man?
There's one on references that's a tough one. You say, what's the hardest to overcome some negativity on? If you don't have some good references, because I know almost in any job, we've checked references. And it'll be interesting how some people respond when you ask them about a candidate. Some will be saying they're great. There's other ones that are very cautious in their response. And when, as a hiring manager, when you hear that caution, you know, you do get some red flags going up. So
on that point, Rich, if you get a bad reference, do you
Don't
ask
use
for
it.
more? No, well, do you ask for more references and just kind of discount the one bad one? If there are two good ones and one bad one, do you discount it, or, you know, how do you manage that?
well, I mean, if you're reading them and some of them are good and you get, you know, an outlier, that's one thing. But, you know, make sure that your references will present you in a good light. The other thing I have done is that people that have asked me to be a reference for them, you know, I make sure I say, you know, what do you want me to highlight in the reference? You
Good
know,
point.
what can I do as a person you're using as a reference? Because I've agreed to be a reference. What do you want me to highlight? If you talk with your reference that way, they can present you in the best light. So I would say do that with any of your references. Just don't put their name down on a piece of paper and you really don't know what they're going to say. You want to know what they're going to say.
Yeah, and to that point, it's always good to tell them what the job is, because sometimes they're going to say something different depending upon what the job is going to be.
Right.
So, okay, so Pete, you already sort of touched the next question, so we're going to skip it. But Rich Snyder, I'm going to throw this one to you first, and then we'll get comments from your partners here. Resume and LinkedIn, you've already sort of talked a little bit about that. What is important? How do you use them? And then do you use them at all to find a candidate you want to interview? When you select the candidate you want to hire? Talk about some to-dos and not to-dos.
Yeah.
You've already mentioned the picture as a not to-do. What are, just talk about that in general.
So I will definitely go out on LinkedIn and try to look somebody up if I can. And I think what I tend to look for is consistency between the resume and LinkedIn. I also try to look for, and with that, how frequently are you job jumping? It's really interesting. You know, when I started out, and it's just hard to believe that, you know, it's been, you know, about 30 years. I remember people saying, it's not the same anymore. People job jump every 2 years. It's not the same, blah, blah, blah. That's what they were saying when I started out. They're still saying that. But I will tell you, as a hiring manager, I look to see if you're jumping every 2 years, that's a red flag, to me anyway. Because it takes, at least in an organization and again, I can speak to my organization. We're so large, it takes almost a year to a year and a half to even understand where the bathroom is. Obviously kidding, but like to understand, we have such breadth and scope that by the time 2 years comes, we're finally getting, we're getting production, you know, so it's a big commitment. So I do look for that on LinkedIn. You know, again, you know, don't put, you know, you and your friends at the beach, you know, as your picture on LinkedIn. It's, you know, that's going to be a turnoff. I would think to most people. And interestingly, you know, and I've in my team, who, you know, consists of people older than me, of younger than me, of different backgrounds across the board, every single person feels that way about the picture on LinkedIn. It's really interesting. It's not a generational thing. It seems to be across the board, everybody. So those are the things that I look for. Yeah. You know, I like to see the schools that you went to. It's interesting. It's as an interest, but it's not, I wouldn't, you know, call somebody in or not based on it. It's just interesting. Get a feel for who you are. Yeah.
Hey,
Well,
Bob, can
Pete,
I
I'm
go
going to
back to
ask
the-
you,
can
go
I
ahead,
back
Rich.
to the last question? Because I
Yeah.
think there's something there because that, I mean, Rich and Peter did a nice job on it, but I think there's something there that may be helpful. Is some people just don't interview well. And how important it's still pretty important in the selection process. So again, two things are important there. What kind of job are you going to? If you're going to be a data scientist, head down, never pop up. The person who's doing the interviewing will probably say, okay, the interview skills aren't that good. Let's really dig into the experience and your skills and stuff like that. However, even in those positions, practice with somebody. Go in and find somebody, a mentor or somebody that you can practice with. You will become more comfortable at it after enough repetitions. So do that for yourself. So even though you may not be the best at your interview skills, you can get better. And you got to get used to those questions that you're going to get that are kind of like out in the left field, as far as you would be concerned, that may be of concern to the interviewer. So get somebody to practice with you. That's what I would recommend on the interviewing skills. Try to get better.
I think
no,
it's great. I was going to say, it goes back to the comment that I think Rich Snyder said, which was, how prepared are you? And that's one step in it. Like, how serious are you about our company, our organization? That means a lot to me when I'm sitting across from you. And I think that's just one other step in it, that exercise you go through. Even if you are good at interviewing, talking to someone about it, that's great. Thanks.
So one of the tips that I was taught years ago, and it'll be interesting to see if this comes up later on today, is to video record yourself and then watch it. Because the number of times that you say words that you didn't realize that you were doing, the number of times you scratch your head or you do some weird, response, people notice. And, it's fascinating to watch yourself on video. It's one of the reasons why I think using, webinars is kind of cool, because you don't normally get to see yourself as you're presenting in front of an audience, and you do when you're on Teams or Zoom or any of that stuff. So Pete, I was going to pick on you for a second because Rich said something about interviewing and resume and sorry, not interviewing, but resume, about duration of the job. And he comes from a large, academic medical center organization, large IDN. You've worked in that organization, but you've also worked in different other kinds of companies, including some smaller organizations, some startups, as well as some vendors. How important is it for you when you're looking at candidate, when you're in that kind of world, to look at the duration? Is it as critically important as it is to Pete and is to Rich and his team, or is it less important for you?
Yeah, it depends on the position. It depends on the organization. I mean, I've spent time in life sciences, and you see a lot of folks who just pop around in Cambridge, and that's not. That might be more a result of the incestuous nature of that industry, and not necessarily the person. And I think but you need to go in eyes wide open even in those moments too. I would say I typically do have a bias for someone who I want to bring on that's going to stay for a while. I mean, I certainly have worked at smaller organizations where, where there's always potential, but there may not be the infrastructure to provide the formal career path training and some of those things that allow for sustainability. But anyways, I think it's the provider organization, healthcare IT organization versus life sciences versus consulting, and is there consistency? Is there a North Star? Is there, or is it a bit erratic, jumping back and forth? And if there's consistency and there's some organizations that I recognize and that I respect, then yeah, even if they've been in short periods, I will definitely ask the question, because I'm looking for someone that wants to be at my organization and wants to grow my organization.
Great, great. Rich, Kubika, did you have any additional comments on that one, or move on to the next?
No, I think we're good on that. Thanks.
Okay, excellent. So experience, let's talk about that subject for a while. So how can a candidate, this is a question we actually had from our last event that we carried over. How can a candidate with 20 plus years of work experience transitioning from one career path to another best present themselves for a new position?
I love this question. This is like the, no pun intended, age-old question. You know, I was thinking about it, and it may not always work out, but when it does, you could get to a hiring manager that is not industry focused, and they're saying like, I want someone from the banking industry that's going to show me how rigid, or from the manufacturing. Like a lot of times in manufacturing, you get some very process oriented individuals. And so think about that. Like, what is your industry known for, or what skill set do you have that, yeah, maybe you're not going to make up for or compensate for the healthcare industry skill set, but in some cases you are. And if you can highlight that, and, you know, again, I bring up process, Lean Six Sigma, you see that in a ton of different applications. If you could highlight that because you're coming from manufacturing, or, you know, your financial or budget management from finance, I think that's a way to do it, and to think about what you do offer. And then I think there's another question we'll get to in a bit, which is how do you get past the resume part of it? But yeah.
Any other comments on that one?
So it's interesting, right? It's a great question. It's actually something I did, right? So I sold software for 10 years, and then I moved into healthcare. And, you know, at that time, you know, I was young enough that I could, you know, do an internship, and I could, and just really start over. Sometimes that's an option. Sometimes it's not, right? And when it's not an option, I really agree with what Pete said, right? So in my organization, we just brought in a new top person who is heading up our digital health organization, who comes from finance and manufacturing, hasn't worked in healthcare, but is now the top dog. And sometimes, you know, there is, at least on the health system side, there isn't. It's a business, right? You need to have IT, you need to have finance, you need to have human resources, you need to have all of those things. And those functions are very, industry agnostic. And so it's really, you know, highlighting those technical skills that you've had in that case, right? Like whether it be in budget, or whether it be in programming, or whatever it might be. And, you know, and then it's really just, you know, applying it to a different industry. But you know, it's really finding those skills, highlighting those skills that are industry agnostic in those cases. And it does work. Yeah.
I mean, I think what you're pointing out is you need to create a value proposition where you can explain why you'd be valuable to your new employer. To Pete, your comment about, you know, somebody from manufacturing, you know, healthcare can definitely improve its process. Now, the one thing that I would comment on is, if you come from another industry and you go into healthcare, don't tell everybody in healthcare that you know how to fix their problems. Because because we've all heard that. Every single one of us tonight have heard that from people who think they know better. This is a tough industry if you've never worked in it before. It's a very complicated business, lots of competing individuals with very different business models that don't exist in any other industry, and I've worked in about a dozen. So don't pretend that you know better, but you always can add value based on what you do know, and learn from it, as Rich did, you know, very successfully transitioning.
You know, you made me think of something that a mentor of mine, who, you know, is now down in the Baltimore area, but he used to say to me, I love it when people come in and say, well, why don't you just do it this way? And he's like, oh, gee, thanks. It's like the kind of thought process that the show didn't start until you actually got there, even though you were an hour late. So there are, it may sound logical, but again, it's that emotional intelligence to understand that there are certain things baked into the culture, baked into the way a company is structured that don't allow you necessarily to do what might seem obvious.
So we're going to stay on the experience concept for a second. And so the next question is, well, what about people who have virtually no experience? They have no background in the field. Maybe they're a student. What's the recommendations to them? How do they get into the field? They may have education in the field, but they haven't really done real work yet.
Yeah.
So I can talk to that because I actually did that, right? And what I would say, what I did, and my friend Steve Earl in my center square actually was the first person that I ever spoke to when I decided I was going to move into healthcare, right? And
good choice, by the way.
Very good choice. And he said, well, why don't you come to a Himss conference down in Newport? I did. It was at Salve Regina. And there I met actually the person I was referring to before, who was my mentor. And he gave me an internship. And the reason he said he gave me an internship was because before I interviewed with him, this was after I met him, but before, we started, I just got as knowledgeable as I possibly could about the EHR, right? I just sucked in and read every single thing I could. I couldn't even tell you half of what I said that day. But back then, he was impressed because he was like, I work with people who've been doing this for 10, 15 years who could not have told me what you just told me. And that made the difference. And so it is, it's, as Pete said, it's the preparation. We have lots of people who start out and everyone gets started, right? And so it's come in, be prepared, know why you're interested in healthcare, right? Why is it healthcare? Why is it not finance, right? So have a good reason for that. For me, it was, I really enjoyed the complex workflows. That's what I really liked. But for somebody else, it might be something else. So, know why. What's your why?
I think that's really important, Rich. Know about not only the industry you're going into, but the specific company, do research, go on Google, learn about it. When I switched industries twice, from utilities to healthcare to higher ed, and the amount of research that I did for that switched industry is I went in well prepared so that I can use the skills and the background I have and do the transition. And you have to make sure that you can relate that in such a way that people understand that you can do it. So but that's for the experienced person. That's probably the 20+ year person, if you're in the type of position you're going into, it's going from management position to management position. So there's a lot of variables in it, but know everything you can about the industry and about the specific company you're looking at anytime you go into an interview.
Hey, Bob.
Yeah, go for it.
If we zoom out and maybe make that question a bit more generic, and there was a question that came in here too. I think it's all well and good if you can tell a good story. Obviously, that's paramount. But what if you just have a PMP or master's and that you don't have any experience, and it's all on paper now. It's all on your LinkedIn. And how do you get to that point where you can tell that story? So I think we should dip into that a bit from the on paper or the application standpoint. And just if that's okay, Bob, just to extend.
What that was the first question that came in to the Q&A.
That and I feel like I just want to be true to the group in answering that question. it is, we're talking about getting in front of, like Rich was talking about getting in front of, his mentor, for example. You could also read the question of, this is me on paper. And but I guess another way to look at that is like, get in front of those. I mean, do those creative things that that Rich did to get to that point where you can tell that story if you don't have that experience. And then you have to highlight why you're smart. I mean, we want to all hire smart people, smarter people than us, all that good to great, get the right people on the bus. And especially if you're coming in with limited experience, I think you're going to be able to do that if you can network your way in.
Yeah. So I agree with your, I was going to actually make a quick comment because I worked in healthcare and then went into IT and then decided to go back into health IT or combine my careers. How did I do it? It was very similar to what Rich did. I started going to New England Himss meetings and I met people. And I actually met Steve way back when. He was one of the people I met. I already knew Cliff J, thankfully. Cliff was a mentor of mine, still is a mentor of mine. And it was going to those meetings, being able to learn the lingo, being able to understand the concepts, and be able to now talk to people intelligently about what problems they were trying to face. Because I had experience, but I had no experience in their industry. I got a job managing HL7, and I didn't know how to spell HL7. And so, you do
now, though, right, Bob?
I do now, exactly.
Okay.
I learned. It was hard. But it's exactly to your point, Rich, is I started going to meetings. I met people. I asked a ton of questions. And I didn't have the experience or the knowledge. I had some experience, but I was able to leverage what I did earlier in my career to what I wanted to do now. So I do see that Liza, thank you very much for posting those questions. We will get to those questions exactly in the last section of the evening, because I have one more question I want to ask this panel, and then we're going to shift over to the recruiting panel, and because I want to give them some time, and then we'll have about a half an hour for questions from the audience. So we do have 2 questions already posted. I appreciate those, but we will get to those later. So the last question is, because the evening was talking about how do I get a job and then be successful at it. So I want to shift and talk about how do I be successful. So what are some of the common characteristics of new employees that are successful in your organization? What makes somebody, successful? And I would love each of you to give me your own individual responses, if you don't mind.
Sure. I'll go on that. You have to be successful at your skills. I mean, that's critical. The next thing is your interaction in teams and collaboration. And then to me, the third one, in order to be successful and to stand out, because you don't want to just stand out to your immediate supervisor. You want to be in a situation where if you're in group meetings or whatever the case may be, you can speak about the industry and you can speak about the industry's business. Not just its IT, but its business. And if you're able to relate the business of the corporation to IT or to your specific job, that's what you want to try to do. You get the person that can only talk about their job, and great, they're a good resource, you want them on the team. But if you want to stick out, you have to go that extra jump where you get involved and know the business and know how to talk about it. I'll leave it there.
So I agree with all of that. It's interesting though, because I have different 3. So again, it comes to intellectual curiosity, right? It's the reason it was the very first thing that I look for when I'm interviewing, and I want to see it on the job. And it also is creativity, right? So there are people that when they have downtime, they go for a walk, they do whatever, right? There are other people who have downtime and think of all these different things in different ways that we might be able to do something and really, get us to a different place. That's another thing, that I look for. and that I've seen with people who are successful. They look at the world very differently than other people. Like they see another angle, an angle that no one else sees, right? I work with a guy who was, he's a, you know, a pretty senior guy at Mass General Brigham. And when I was reporting I'd go in to meet with him and I'd say, okay, here's this, and this. And he would say, but did you think about that? I'm like, I never did. You know? And those are the people that to me are always the most successful. Yeah. And of course producing. So, sorry, Pete.
No, it's fun to go last in that because you guys covered some really good content. I think be successful at what you signed up for. You know, the operational tempo. Get done what if you're a project manager, use your project management skills, and then you know, pair that with I got to use curiosity again, and let's just be okay with that because it's a good theme to walk away from or walk away with. And then I think it's another one is relationships, customer relationships. Create those hooks. Organizations love that. I want to have someone on my team that a client's like, I only want Mike. I only want Sarah. Or like, you know, relative to Sarah, like, please don't take them off my, and you know, you may have to, but like, those are the kind of people that I want. And the client loves them. And that is, we want our clients to be successful. So those are the people that you're going to reward because they're rewarding the organization, because they're rewarding the client.
Excellent answers. And I love the fact that all three of you had different takes on that question. There's clearly a lot of ways to be successful, but on the opposite side, every one of us has seen a new employee that is just circled the drain, and 9 months later, a year later, maybe 6 weeks later, they were no longer there. And everybody sort of said, I knew that was going to happen. I knew they weren't the right person. So what is it, or what could it be that makes that individual not the right person? And Rich Schneider, you look like you have
the know-it-all.
You know the answer. Yeah.
It's the know-it-all. You know, they just go in, they're like, they know everything, they don't want to hear, they don't want to listen, and they just turn everybody off.
You know what? And Rich, again, Snyder made a good point about, it sounds like his team has a thoughtful hiring process. It's important, you know, be happy that someone takes their time hiring, that they're thorough and you're interviewing them and they're interviewing you. It is very difficult for both the person as well as the organization when it's not a good fit, but yeah. And then one other comment is just approach. I think you have to have a good approach to how you take notes, how you repeat back, whatever style you've learned to be successful and whatever you did prior, that'll show. And if you were successful, you will be.
Final last words, Rich Kubica.
Oh, I thought I answered this one already. But if you really want to know, I mean, Rich Schneider said the know-it-all. And the other one is for the person that oversold himself and couldn't back it up. Because you get those two. You know, yeah. And that was the know-it-all during the interview process that somehow got through the interview process. And when they showed up, they weren't able to do the job. So
yeah, we've all met them.
Right.
So I appreciate my hiring manager panel very much. Thank you guys very much. Don't go away. We'll be back after a commercial break with our recruiting panel. So Steve, take it away.
All right. First off, let me thank Rich, and Peter for your sage advice and sharing your experience. It was great. I think it's been very helpful to a lot of people.
We're like a new version of the Newhart show, or the right.
No, I think a lot of collective wisdom there from based on your experience. So thank you for sharing that with us. I would like to now, as we switch over to the recruiter side, I'd like to pick on a theme that is common here in Rhode Island where I am. If someone needs to get something done or wants to get a seat at a popular restaurant, the most common expression is, you got to know a guy. You got to have someone on the inside. You got to know somebody. That's very, very true in terms of making career changes. I think all of us who have had more than one spot in our careers have often benefited by the connections we've had, either with someone in that organization or someone with experience that they could share with us, or someone who had contacts. And a good recruiter is that somebody that you need to know because they know the industry, they know the contacts that you don't. A good recruiter is not only trying to fill a spot for a client, they're trying to find a good fit for you. They're not just sticking a peg in a hole somewhere. People that do that don't tend to last very long as recruiters. It's the people who really invest the time to know their clients' environment, their clients' needs, and the applicant, the person who is looking for a position, who might be looking for a career change. They'll take the time to get to know you as an applicant, what your background is, what your strengths and weaknesses are. And they'll not only try to alert you to a spot where you might be qualified, but more importantly, they'll try to help you find a good environment. Our previous speakers talked so much about having someone who's a good fit with the team that's already there. A good recruiter is going to have a good sense of that and will be able to give you that advice that you could not possibly get on your own without some knowledge. So I'll start off by introducing myself and then ask our panelists to join in and talk about themselves. I'm Steve Earl. I'm a past president. I was president back during the Y2K situation, so that lets you know how long I've been around. I've worked in a variety of healthcare organizations, large academic systems, smaller community hospitals. I've also worked in long-term care and home care. And the transitions I've seen have just been astounding during my career. And I'd have to say, if there's one thing that I could pass along, is that people need to build relationships with folks that can help them as their career changes, because no one's career today is going to stay the same. Unless you're sweeping the floors and happy with it, I can guarantee you that what you're doing today will not be what you're doing 5 years from now, or the skills that you have today are likely to be helpful, but not the most needed skills 5 years from now. So I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to ask Katie Bethel Flynn to go ahead and introduce herself. Katie, I don't know which name you're using first now. Katie's recently become married. I've known her for years as Katie Flynn.
Yes. Thanks, Steve. Hi, everyone. I'm Katie Bethel. I am my day job, a senior account executive at Clean Consulting Group. It's a healthcare IT staffing company. And with New England Himss, I am the co-chair for the programs committee, organizing all of the phenomenal webinars and events that we do. Excited to go back to in-person. And I'm also president-elect for this year, going into next year. So I'm really excited to be here tonight with everyone here, and looking forward to some great recruiter questions coming up.
Thanks, Katie. Ariel, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, everyone. My name's Ariel. I work for Tech Systems. I've been there for about 5.5 years in various roles. Currently, I'm a division lead within our healthcare and life sciences verticals. And yeah, I'm also really excited to answer some of these recruiter questions. These are great questions, and hopefully they can help you, progress in your career.
Thank you, Ariel. And Melissa Mio is another past president of our New England Himss chapter. She has been a recruiter in the past, and she has also worked with a lot of colleagues on the health IT side, so she can sort of see things from both sides of the fence. Melissa, could you share a little bit about yourself?
Thank you so much, Steve. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's so great to see follow all the other fabulous past presidents that gave so much wisdom today. It was really great and so exciting to see Katie too, because Katie's our incoming president. And I remember when she first came to New England Hymns and meeting her back then, and now look at her go. So it's great to see more female leaders, which is wonderful. And so I am vice president of sales at Carium. We're a virtual care platform, and I'm very excited about helping making healthcare better for all of us, for the patient, and not burdening the care teams that have done such great work, especially during these turbulent times we've all lived. So I've been in healthcare IT for over 20 years. I worked on the consulting and advisory side and have had to help hire people, both permanent and temporary workers, as well as in my role at Witt Kiefer was a executive search firm helping really more with the C-suite. So CIOs, CTOs, CMIOs, and CNIOs. So really worked with the gamut of from an analyst level all the way up to the C-suite. So it's really exciting to see people's careers progress. And I'm so happy to be here to share any wisdom I can.
Thanks so much, Melissa.
Thank you.
So we're going to drop a couple of questions that we had for the panelists, and we'll keep an eye on the Q&A session too. If something comes up, please, those of you who are attending, please feel to jump in. First question I'm going to toss out though is, as recruiters, how do you go about finding qualified candidates?
Several ways. Usually we have a company database that we have probably thousands among thousands of wonderful candidates with resumes and data in there. We also have LinkedIn Recruiter is a great way. On LinkedIn Recruiter, there's actually for anyone really, you can click on your LinkedIn and you can click on a field that says open to new opportunities. So that, signifies to us as recruiters that you are, looking for new opportunities. And through Monster, through Indeed, Career Builder, through just networking events, either in person or virtual, and through referrals. If we have a great consultant or an FTE that, we just help to place at one of our customers and they're great and they have a person that they think would like to, benefit from working with Queen, then we offer a referral bonus as well. So.
Great. Ariel, Melissa, any other thoughts on that?
I think Katie covers it. I mean, yeah, at the end there, when she mentioned referrals, I was nodding. That's a huge one. I mean, refer someone you know is the biggest compliment, and also the best way, like you were saying, Steve, in the beginning, networking is key in this industry. But yeah, I think you covered it.
Yeah, I think Katie did a great job covering that question.
So given that there's these multiple databases out there, multiple places for people can go searching for careers, what makes candidates stand out?
I'll take that one if you want, Steve. I think what makes you stand out is that your belief in yourself. And if you don't have belief in yourself, then get a mentor to help you and grow that belief in yourself and hone in on, like some of the other folks talked about earlier, gaining the knowledge that you need to build that confidence in yourself. And I think what was critically important is that emotional intelligence and to network. So first of all, believe in yourself and network and build your brand, because your brand is what you're going to be, whether you want to be in sales or not, you're in sales because you have to actually sell yourself at some point when you're interviewing. And so to be humble, to be kind, to be yourself, and to try to find a way to just network and ask people for help. Could I get your insight? There's a lot of people who want to help. Can you share your opinion? If I, talk to you about what I'm trying to do with my career, people love to share their opinions. So I think that's a way to stand out and then take their advice and actually follow through and do it. I think that differentiates you.
I would agree, Melissa. All great points. I think two others that I can think of are, doing your due diligence, doing your homework, reviewing the company, the website, what's on their latest news, look on their website, industry trends. Maybe you look at a couple of LinkedIn profiles of folks that are on this team at that organization, kind of look at their backgrounds a little bit, familiarize yourself with maybe some of their bullets that they do on their day-to-day basis, so you can kind of speak to that a little bit. And another big thing is that makes you stand out is thank you notes. I know a while back these were handwritten. Now most of them are electronic, but you know, we do see some thank you notes every now and then that, you know, we pass along to the hiring managers that we support, and it does go a long way.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I do want to say one thing about the thank you notes. I think that's a really good point. I years ago lost a job because I didn't Federal Express my thank you note back in the day.
Oh my gosh.
I did. And it was funny because if I told you what the job was, you'd all be cracking up. So I was meant to be in healthcare IT. It was for a different like food thing. It was a blessing really. But I think it's really nice to differentiate yourself. There are times where I will actually do that because people do open up like a Federal Express or like, you know, if it's sent to them and it's a handwritten thank you note, people will open it. So if you do want to differentiate yourself and you've taken good notes and you've listened and you're being specific about what they're looking for in a respectful way, showing that you really listen and that you care, I think that's always a good thing to differentiate yourself.
Singing telegram might be a little over the top, but sounds like thank you notes are still very, they show a real interest, I think, from an applicant. So there's a lot of different recruiting firms, a lot of recruiters out there. The question is, how do you best work with the right recruiter? We've got several sub items here, and I'm gonna go through them and ask each of you to respond to a couple of them that really resonate with you or that you really are concerned about. They include: do you need to be connected to all the recruiters? Do you need to network with them in advance of looking for a job? Would you work with multiple recruiters or only a select few? Should you maintain relationships with recruiters even if you're not currently looking? Or should you just wait for a recruiter to contact you? So there's a lot of questions out there about how someone should work with a recruiter, and I'll throw it out to the floor.
I can start us off. Those are great questions, and probably everyone feels that way. I think probably every individual in this room is getting solicited 40 to 50 times a week, probably more now because of there being this whole virtual world and remote world now. But I mean, I think the most important thing, this might answer a couple of questions here, but when you connect with a recruiter, I think that them reaching out to you and connecting about what you're looking for and what your skill goals and interests are, as opposed to, hey, I have a role, I have a requisition that's open right now that I think you'd be a good fit for. I think that's a huge differentiator, because you want someone that wants to learn about you and what your career goals are before just being like, I'm reaching out to you about a specific position. Because that's, you know, it could be, like you said, fitting a square into a hole, whatever. I think the other key thing is transparency from both the recruiter and the candidate. You want to work with someone that is fully transparent about, you know, the clients that they work with, who they have relationships with. Like, there are times when, you know, recruiting companies will have a bunch of roles that maybe they don't even know the manager, and maybe there are roles that they do know the manager really well. I think it's so important to like have that transparency of like, hey, I can get you in front of this manager because I know the hiring manager and we're going to communicate about your background. Or it's like, hey, to be fully transparent, I have a couple of these roles. Some of them I don't know the client as well, but this is what I'm going to do to get you an interview. So I think just like all the communication, the transparency, again, you know, highlighting the career goals as opposed to just being role centric are all key differentiators about a recruiter.
Yeah, good points, Ariel. I think the more you tell the recruiter, the more that we can help you. We understand your goals, like Ariel said, what you're looking for. And I think you absolutely do network with recruiters ahead of even looking for a job. Keep that dialogue, keep that avenue open, meet for coffee, meet for on a Zoom, get to know that person, you know, and keep your options open. Maybe makes a few good relationships, you know, because at the end of the day, you want to do what's best for you. And some organizations may not have, you know, positions. The more recruiters you're connected with, the more opportunities essentially you'll have. But at the same time, you know, keeping those relationships ongoing. And even if when you're not looking, could still be connective and proactive and establishing those. Absolutely.
I think when it comes to recruiters, it's important to build a trust and a relationship. I remember there was a recruiter that had stayed in touch with me, and she was really lovely and kind, and she just built a great relationship with me. And I literally was in the process of leaving a job, and she's like, "I heard you're leaving." And she knew, like, before I even I really was going to call her that day, and she knew this is how good this woman was. And she, after 7 years of calling me, placed me. So that's an amazing recruiter because she had a great relationship. I trusted her. So I think trust is a really big thing. Someone with integrity, look for someone who has integrity in your values and, you know, that really cares when it comes to recruiter. But here's something bold I'm going to say: get to the point in your career where you don't need a recruiter, where you have your brand built, you've built your network, people know you, trust you, and they want you to come work for them. That's always a great thing to do. Also, if you're working with a recruiter and you don't get the job, and this was really hard when I worked at the executive search, especially at the C-suite, it's really hard when you come in second. It's really hard when you don't get the job or you're eliminated from the process. Don't burn a bridge with that recruiter. That person could get you the next job that could be your dream job. So don't burn the bridge. Don't take it personally. I know it's hard. If you have a hard time taking things personally, read the book from Don Miguel Ruiz, The 4 Agreements, where you could work on not taking it personally, because it's sometimes not about you or about the recruiter. It's about the recruiter getting, really helping that client get something specific. Especially if they're paying for that service, they're paying a lot of money to get the right candidate that fits a specific need. And just because you didn't get it doesn't mean that you didn't have all of those things. Maybe you did, maybe you didn't, but learn from what you did have, what you didn't have, what you need to do to get to that level or that type of position, and try not to take it personally, and try not to burn the bridge. Because I've seen people do that and they don't realize they're even doing it. And it's my heart goes out to them, because I'm thinking, wow, you know, now it's going to be harder to get the next one, because, you know, if this is how you're acting, how are we going to get you into the next one? Like, so just think about that and really look at those relationships and how you interact with them, and ask for help. So.
Great responses from all of you. Thank you. Let's talk a little bit about the importance of the resume and LinkedIn. And are there key words or phrases that recruiters are looking for?
Yeah, I think it definitely depends on the position, you know, across the IT. So if you're looking for a project manager, maybe you look for PMP, you look for those technical skills, you look for that agile or waterfall methodology, those type of buzzwords. You know, I think it's important to, if you are really interested in a position, looking at that job description that you have and taking a second to say, hey, I wonder if I have some of those buzzwords that you know, that are in the required section. Maybe I can insert some of those into my resume, you know, catch the recruiter's eye, catch the manager's eye that way. And then that actually goes from a, you know, an FTE, you're applying directly to an organization through their HR portal. A lot of companies now, you know, have applicant tracking systems that they just scan and try to find buzzwords. But I think, you know, LinkedIn is also, I think, Rich, you said it earlier about matching your resume to your LinkedIn profile. I think that's a big one for sure.
Yeah, I think I'll add in for like the LinkedIn side, to have, it goes with like the curiosity piece, like to have different interests or things that you follow, I think sticks out as well. Also recommendations on LinkedIn or endorsements. Those are, I think, also super beneficial. And those will also help you stand out. But again, I think, I mean, the resume and the importance of the keywords, those are things that will also, like Katie was saying, like keywords will catch the recruiter's eyes and initially get you to them. Then once you're having that conversation, it's like, how well can you articulate what's in those bullets of the resume, and how much of that are you actually responsible for versus we did this or the team built this? Like, what did you do specifically, how that compares to the resume and LinkedIn?
Yeah, I think the consistency on LinkedIn and resumes is really important. I've had candidates I've worked with in the past that it wasn't, and I've gone on to LinkedIn and compared and had to tell them that I'm a little confused here because the dates don't line up, things don't line up. I mean, that's just a red flag. And so I think that's really important. And I think also don't overestimate what you've done, because the truth will come out. Be honest about what you have done in the past. Because when you do a reference check, sometimes it does come, it'll come out, that truth will come out.
Hey, thank you. Think a little more broadly now. What characteristics would you say would really push a candidate to the top of the pile?
Are you going to go, Ariel?
I was just about to say, are you about to go? You can go first.
I was thinking that the other panelists talked about curiosity. So really being interested, really showing your interest, that you've done your, being well prepared, doing the research, doing the, I just think that all of them, Rich and Pete and, Rich, all gave some great insight there. And it's the same thing, being really curious, but being prepared, doing your homework, asking the right questions, based on the homework that you've done. Maybe even beforehand, if you have someone in your network that works for that company, to talk to them, to learn a little bit about that company. I think that helps you stand out, to learn more, that you can, just to be more insightful. I think that's always a good thing. And I think to listen. I think there's so many people that want to talk and they don't stop and just listen and actively listen. So I don't know. I think that always helps.
Yeah, to go off your point, Melissa, I think, asking, you're speaking to a recruiter, you just got an interview for a company you're really excited about, asking those questions like, what's this manager like? What's their personality? What should I have prepared? Do you think this is a good question to ask? Kind of having that open and transparent, there we go again, transparent, but dialogue with a recruiter to really, make sure you're set up for success when that interview does come along. And I feel like candidates that do ask those questions and prepare themselves in that way, kind of stand out to me.
Yeah, and I think going off that is also just like being coachable and open to feedback. I think it kind of also goes hand in hand with what the hiring panel is saying about people that come in that maybe are overconfident or think the know-it-alls. Be that person that's super coachable to the recruiter, because then the recruiter will also then be able to tell the hiring manager, like, hey, this person takes feedback really well. And then also ultimately, if you are open to feedback and you're coachable, you're going to be most prepared for the interview, because you're going to be able to, best absorb what the recruiters are telling you to prepare.
Yeah, I know in one of my jobs, I was up against two people, and it was really embarrassing because I went to a New England Himss meeting after, and I met this guy, like the first guy that I walked into, and he's like, "Oh, you got the job I wanted." I was like, "Oh," it was kind of awkward. But one of the reasons why I got the job, I think, was, I connected with the person I was interviewing with. It's a connection, but I had in my back pocket like a plan. I'd really gone through the interview process. I was at the end, and I really was thoughtful about what they were trying to do, and I had a potential plan in my back pocket that I put together, and I brought it with me to the meeting and just had it. And I didn't use it as a talking point, but I had it in my back pocket to give me confidence because I'd done my research. And then on the way out, he had talked about a plan, and he asked me about that. And I said, well, I'm actually going to leave this with you. This is something, just remedial thoughts of putting it together. And he was so impressed that I actually had listened to all the other interviews and had come up with a plan and a strategy that was a potential one. So that, you could be creative like that to differentiate yourself. So it worked for me that time, but I don't know if it would work every time, but something that I tried.
That's great. Thank you. As we all know, the world of work is changing dramatically. A lot of folks are still working at home or remotely part of the time. What sort of jobs are you seeing now in healthcare and in health IT? Are they mostly on premises or remote work or a mixture of both?
Go ahead, Ariel.
It's getting to be more hybrid now. If you asked us a year ago when we did this, I think we were 100% remote. However, I will say that there's so much more flexibility now. Having the remote, option has opened up a lot of doors for candidates and hiring for more niche skill sets. I think the statistic is that, I think we got this from like Gartner, is that by 2022, about 53% of IT jobs are going to be remote. And so, I mean, there is going to still be some customers and some projects that, the person needs to be on site, but there is just so much more flexibility now for remote workers. That's what I'm seeing, at least.
Yeah, I would agree with Ariel. Spot on. It's, 6 months, 9 months ago, pretty much for the most part remote. Now we're seeing more organizations that are doing a hybrid approach, maybe 1 or 2 days mandated on site. And it's posing to be a little bit challenging because, there's so many openings and jobs out there that are 100% remote. And, if you're a project manager that really wants to be 100% remote, then, you may not take a job that has 2 days on site. So it's posing to be a challenge as well.
I think you both answered the question really well. I mean, I'm hearing across the country from, the CIOs that some of them had been hybrid for a long time or had been remote. They offer both. There are organizations that are still having more of the C-suite come in on certain days, for specific meetings, but across the board, I think that the organizations that are really committed to finding the best talent are being really flexible and being creative to get that talent. And it's working. Because they can, the job market is hot enough for that to happen.
Mm-hmm.
The next question I had was going to be for people that need to or want to work remotely, either all the time or primarily remotely. What advice would you give them that might have them tack a little bit different direction from someone who's more open to working on site?
I would just say to be upfront with your recruiter about what you're, once again, transparent, be upfront with what you're looking to do. If you want to stay 100% remote, chances are there's a lot of 100% remote jobs out there nowadays that you might wait and find the right opportunity. But just be upfront and transparent about it. And then that way the recruiters can portray that in your resume to the client, and everything's outlined right on the table.
I would also add in, if that is something that you want to achieve in your career, is just full remote. I think it's really important that as you're looking at progressing in your career, if you're going to be fully remote, what are you doing to build relationships virtually? Because it's not the same. It just isn't. And as much as we try to make it the same, it's just not. So you just really have to, make that a priority, networking, unless, you're happy with your position right now. But I think like we've talked about so much this evening is like networking is so important. So like, how are you building your relationships virtually? What are you doing to make yourself stand out? And that's just another like thought when it comes to like thinking about wanting fully remote jobs moving forward.
I think that's a great point. I think also if you haven't had success, if you haven't worked remotely before, I think you should talk to people who have and set up a structure that will work for you to be successful. And to your point, and how do you connect and get visibility within your organization if you are 100% remote? So I think that's, some people just get up and shower and act like they're, get dressed. Don't like, maybe it's working in pajamas isn't going to do it for you. Maybe it's going and working, like acting like you're dressed up, going into the office, so whatever it is, but find out what will work for you and what has worked for others. And I would put that in, I would try those things, especially if you haven't worked it because working from home is not for everyone. You think it might be, but until you do it, and I've done it for years, it's good to learn. If it's new to you.
Great points all around. Thank you. Let's talk for a second about applicant testing, either technical, logical testing for proficiency or personality. What types of tests and other screening tools are being used?
This depends, I would say, again, going back to like, what's the skill set that the client is hiring for? If it's going to be a technical role, I know our company has like these technical assessments that we can have candidates take, or we use one of our senior level consultants to actually screen someone for us and send us like the level of their competency. But I mean, I think our screening process with like more functional type of positions really rely on reference checks. And I want to talk to a reference that someone didn't give me. I want to look at their LinkedIn and see who their manager is. And I want to make sure that that person is saying all the things that this hiring manager wants to hear. So I think a lot of it comes down to, again, the references. But again, it depends on the skill set. Yeah.
Yeah, we use a tool called Tech Screen as well, and it's really a kind of multiple choice over the phone or over the video test that is given to potential candidates on really technical positions, like DBAs, developers, those types of roles, that just to really highlight the technical expertise. And we usually send those over to our clients as well. But I think, yeah, references is a big one. And just, once again, as you're talking to them, getting to know and understand personality, matching that to, the culture of the position and the company that they're, being presented for.
I think there's a lot of different tests out there. And I think if you're someone interviewing, don't get nervous or, overly concerned about it. Just do the very best you can with the test, because I think sometimes people overthink it and get really nervous about that. I think that there's different organizations doing, when I did the recruiting for the consulting firm, we did, what you said, Ariel, we would do have someone more senior interview that person to see if they're, saying that they're a level, whatever, as an Epic analyst, whatever. We would have someone who had that same skill set, interview them and say, yeah, based on what I hear, I can tell that they're at this level or not. And so that was helpful. So, don't overestimate what you can do, be honest, because, people are willing to give you training and willing to let you grow too at times. So I think that's another piece of it. Just don't get overly nervous about it. Do the best you can and you'll probably be fine if it's meant to be.
Okay, thanks. A lot of people wonder, how do I get to the next step? Once I've gone over the recruiter hurdle, what can I do to improve my prospects for getting to the next step? A lot of times it stops after the first hurdle with a recruiter.
I think one of the things Katie had mentioned, I would say like the first thing to do would be write a thank you note, and as Melissa was saying, addressing specific things that came up during the interview. And then also, I think using your network to see who is connected with who really helps. There's probably, like, if you are good on LinkedIn and you connect with people that you've networked with, if you can find some sort of third degree connection or someone that can put in a recommendation for you, I think that goes a long way as well. But I think also just consistency and persistence are really important.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was well said. I think
me
that's
too.
really
Yes,
well said. And I just think you just want to be true to yourself and do the best you can. And I think follow up professionally, follow up if that's really what you want. And, remember, you're interviewing them too. It's not just about you wanting the job. It's about, is this the right culture? Is this the right fit for you? Because, doing that due diligence will help. Maybe you do have a connection, someone that has worked there before, and just asking their opinion, what it's like there and what the culture's like, because that's going to be so important to your longevity at the company, potentially.
Another question is for people that have been in a certain job or with a certain organization for a while, and they might feel they're getting a little bit rusty in terms of their interviewing skills. How can people keep their interviewing skills current? And Melissa, I'm going to ask you to start off with that one.
Sure. Well, I think one thing you can do is if you don't already have one, find a mentor, because if you have a mentor, and there's a lot of people, I have one, you could practice with the mentor, number one. Number two, if people are reaching out to you on LinkedIn and they are, maybe you're not looking and you don't need a job and you don't want a job, but maybe you just connect with that recruiter to have another person or that person looking at you and just have a conversation and practice. It doesn't hurt to have practice with someone and learn and just see. I think the other thing is, it sounds funny, but you can take some questions off the internet, like that are typical questions, right, that people ask, and stand in front of a mirror or record yourself, like you had said, Bob, before. You could do that. Or have someone record you and ask the questions, like someone in your life. It is very revealing when you do that. You see what you're like, is that what I really look like? Is that what I really say? I look so weird, but it's good to practice and know. And I think it just helps refine the skill, especially if you haven't done it in a really long time. It will really help you kind of learn where you could be stronger, where you could get better, and a mentor could help you even more.
Yeah, I completely agree, Melissa. I liked your point about, if you do get a call, just about a new opportunity and you're really not looking, just maybe you have a conversation. You kind of answer some questions point blank over that phone call, and right there is, somewhat of an interview practice if you haven't done it in a while.
Good advice. Well, we've got a ton more questions we'd like to post, but I know that we want to get to the general discussion for 6:30. So I'm going to throw out one last question to our recruiter panel. I want to thank you for doing a great job, but we're going to throw one more out, and that is, what niche areas do you have the most challenge finding highly qualified candidates for?
I know for recently, this is in regards to Epic hiring, but Epic Beaker is a challenging skill set to find. That's the lab application. It's very niche and very specific.
That's not new. That's been a problem for a long time.
Oh yeah,
it is. Yeah.
Yep.
Are there any general technical skills or tools that you'd recommend people make sure they're up to speed on? Anything that your hiring firms are looking for in terms of background skills or supplemental skills, in addition to specific business or technical experience?
I feel like newer buzzwords we're hearing are digital innovation and FIRE. We've been hearing these for a number of years as well, but these are buzzwords that we're seeing and kind of across the board at a lot of our healthcare customers.
I think getting knowledgeable and taking, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, depending on like what your skill set is specifically, but like if you're a technical developer or something, like anything within the cloud environment experience and DevOps. I mean, you're hearing that everywhere.
Yeah, and I think if there's a certain role you strive for, you could look at people who have that role and look at what their certifications are. And I would learn more and maybe even reach out to them and say, I'd love to pick your brain someday. I'd love to be a whatever, CIO, CFO, whatever you want to be, clinical informatics specialist, whatever it is. And just maybe ask them to talk to them and what certifications have been most helpful in their career, and talk to them about, how they got there and how their path was. I think that's always helpful. I think looking at like all the different certifications that are out there, like CP Himss, will that help you, technically? Does that differentiate you? Not everybody has that. I think it's a great opportunity there to differentiate yourself a little in some of the other ones.
All right. Well, a lot of great information in a very short amount of time. Katie, Melissa, Ariel, thank you so much for being part of this discussion tonight. And I know that there are some questions that have been piling up, and we want to open it up to a general discussion now. So Bob, can I pass the ball back to you?
Thank you very much, my friend. I appreciate it, and appreciate the phenomenal comments from my friends on the recruiting panel as well. So the rest of the evening is going to be open to everybody to participate and answer questions. And I'm going to go back to the questions as they came in, and then we'll get to additional ones. So the first one was, how do you increase your odds of getting past the first step to be selected for an interview? What are the tips you can share if you don't have an inside connection, especially in a higher level role?
get an inside connection. I mean, I think maybe it was Ariel that talked through 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon. You guys remember that? It was like 10 years ago. It's not really relevant. But to network in, it is. I mean, you're gonna stand out if you stand out. But if you are trying to push the envelope here, what are the relationships that you can have? And how have you been organically doing that over time? I think it was Melissa that was like, if you're going to stand out, you're going to stand out, and you're not going to need a recruiter. I mean, there's plenty of reasons to do it over time, but maybe you've done the care and feeding over time. So it is important if you want to get past that first step in some organizations to get a referral, or it increases the probability.
Yeah, and I'll just put a plug in here for professional organizations, because if you're looking for that higher level job, you should be involved in a professional organization, which should give you that inside connection. So don't believe that things just appear. It's work on your part to make sure you're active in your profession, and that's going to help you get to that higher level job.
I would ask also the recruiter, if you're working with a recruiter, questions about if you get to that next process, what they're looking for, what you need to do. And is there anything you need to do with your resume? Is there anything you need to do to be successful? Because if they know the client really well, then they can help coach you a little bit. That would be the other thing. And just do your due diligence to, be knowledgeable and prepared if you do get through.
Yeah, Melissa, I was actually going to suggest, that's exactly where my brain was going, was, depending on when you say higher level of, how high, I guess would be the first question.
Yeah.
And then, if you're talking at that C level, you really want to be connected into, I think, executive recruiters, right? Because they've got the relationships and all of that. If you don't have and use somebody who does, right? So to me, it's really, building that network as well. So, yeah.
The other thing I was going to put out there, because I know it can be challenging and there's situations where you just don't know anyone in an organization. Are you writing white papers? Are you giving, talks, presentations? Because you can pass those along. And I mean, in some cases you can. So just think about those little extensions. You all are interested in the field, and if you're serious about it, it'll show.
And, be courageous enough to ask for a written reference from people who are, that you've worked with that really value who you are. And maybe you even lead with that with the recruiter and say, I'd love to lead with this, so that they know the kind of work ethic I have, the kind of integrity I bring to the table. I think that's another way of potentially differentiating yourself.
That's a great point.
I mean,
You see that a lot too.
Yeah, years ago, I actually got a job because somebody had told me there was a position open at the organization, and I knew the CIO at the company. And so I networked to meet the CIO, and he said, of course, I'll be happy to sit down and talk to you, Bob. And we talked for an hour. Great conversation. The job never once came up. And I said at the literally the last 5 minutes, I said, by the way, I heard this job is available. He said, oh yeah, I totally forgot. I think you should go talk to Joe. I had the job 2 weeks later.
You made me think of something, Bob, with that. And that is, we talk about professional organizations. We talk about all your professional connections. You all probably have a lot of personal connections, whether it be through, your church or your synagogue or your, whatever, what your kids' friends' parents at school, whatever it might be, but you don't know who knows whom. And, if you're looking, put it out there, and it's amazing
100%.
how quickly you can get connected.
Yeah.
I think also being specific about the type of companies, if you're not clear on like the specific, you want to do an XYZ type of job and you like these type of companies, nobody's reading your mind. We don't know what companies, and people are just so busy. If you can say, I'd love to network and learn more about these companies. Do you know anyone who knows anybody at these companies? Oh yeah, my neighbor so-and-so, he works over there. Sometimes you find out that way by just asking, but people won't know unless you have, if you're not clear in your search, like the names of the hospitals or the companies, or do research and have them at the top of your tongue so that when you're having a conversation, you could throw out those names. Hey, do you happen to know anyone who works at any of these companies? I'm just looking at learning more. And they'll tell you.
And to that point, and I think to the point that somebody else made earlier, leverage LinkedIn extraordinarily. If you have a decent LinkedIn connections, and then leverage them, find out who is second or third connected to somebody at that organization, even if it's not the hiring manager. Just get into somebody. And I do this all the time. I want to talk to somebody at this organization. Who do I know that knows somebody at that company? And then I can either get introduced directly, or I can reach out to that person and say, hey, we're connected to 250 people, including Jack, Joe, and Sally, and I'd love to connect with you. And then you reach out to them later and say, hey, can we chat? Most people, if they get a personalized invitation, if you just send an invitation to link in with somebody, most people ignore it. But if you send a personalized invitation and explain why you're connecting to them, there's a relatively good chance that you will connect. And then they want to know who you are. They're going to look at your profile. You've already 3 steps ahead of the competition already. So unless we have any more comments, I'm going to move on to the next question. So I've been at the same organization for over 20 years with a progression of roles reflecting increased education and responsibility. I'm now the CIO and CISO. Is this seen as a negative now that I'd like to relocate and obtain a higher level role in an organization? If it is, what can I do to overcome this?
I'll take that one if you want, Bob, because I've worked
Sure.
with CISOs and CIOs. I don't think it's a negative at all. Absolutely not. It's perfectly fine. Maybe you become an empty nester and you want to move to another area. Maybe you like a different area in the country. It's definitely fine to grow at any point in your career. And I actually think you're more desirable because you've showed your level of commitment to that organization and that you're ready for something new. I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. Just make sure that you look at the organizations in the area that you are looking for, look at what they're requiring in terms of skill set, in terms of educational level, and make sure, for instance, if they are expecting a master's, then have a master's, or, make sure you check the boxes in those areas, or whatever certifications they're looking for. But I don't see it as a negative at all. I think it's a positive.
What I do think you need to be able to do, though, is be able to talk about why you want to leave in a way that doesn't sound negative. It's one, I think, the biggest turnoffs, and I was surprised that people didn't mention this earlier, but I'll mention it as somebody who's done a lot of hiring. The moment somebody starts talking about why they've left or leaving their current company and say, oh, that asshole boss that I had, that's it, you're done. No one's ever going to hire you from that organization because you now created risk, and people don't want to hire someone that creates risk. So be careful how you talk about a prior boss, a prior organization, even if it's the organization you're working at now, so that the logical reason as to why you want to move, as Melissa said, is makes sense to this new person and doesn't create questions.
Short, simple, sweet, to the point. That's it.
Good point. Anybody else that want to pick up on that one? Okay. If you were looking for an executive level role, how long should you plan on it taking to acquire a suitable position? Oh, come on, guys. Some of you's got to have a comment on that one.
I mean, I was gonna, it's gonna be like a nothing response, but it depends on when you start the clock. Executive level, it has to do with everything that we've been talking about. The networking, the relationships you have with other executives, and So if you're in that kind of position, it could happen in 2 weeks, or it could be a realization that you need to mine that more, and it could take 6 months. I mean, you're not trying to find a job, you're trying to find a job that's executive level that you want and that's a good fit. So, you'll have to be deliberate and just consider it all part of the purpose of meeting with people and understanding their organization. It's a big role to direct, to lead an organization. So that may have been nothing, but I think if you've put in the work, I think it can certainly help accelerate it.
So Pete, I don't think that was nothing. I think that was actually really insightful. To me, it's really a question of how prepared are you? How do you know what you want, right? And do you know what companies are out there? Do you know what those job roles that are executive level look like? How are you defining executive level? And so getting a really clear picture of that is certainly going to hasten your job search. And then it's how much time do you put into networking? How much time do you put into working with, recruiters when you don't know people? How assertive are you on LinkedIn? You're really in the driver's seat for a lot of that. And then there's, of course, getting the interview. I had a woman who was a vice president who, for, family reasons, needed to take a step back and just wanted to be a project manager. The family situation resolved itself. She wanted to get back to an executive level search. It took her about a year, but she was kind of passive about it. So, and she wanted the right thing. And again, you can get an executive level role at the wrong company, and you may find yourself doing that whole search again in 6 months. So again, it's what do you want, is really, to me, the first thing that you need to answer.
And
I think.
I gotta,
Go ahead.
Rick.
I gotta agree with, both Pete and Rich. It is a matter of fit. It does take a lot of effort. And in a fit, it's not what company fits you. It's also the fit that you have to the company. There's a lot of times you're going to be in an interview, it looks really good, but because someone on the executive team didn't quite think you were there or whatever it is a matter of fit going both ways. So I think you may find disappointment, but in the end, if you keep on working at it, it'll take time. How long? Who knows? I agree with Pete. Anything from, Pete and Rich, anything from 2 weeks to a year. So
Yeah.
who knows? It's got to be fitting both ways.
Melissa, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that, what you think about, you bring about. So, you can own it in a way that you really put a goal forth and a strategy on what you want to achieve, and then look at the barriers to what is in your way to achieve that goal, and get help from, like I've said before, a mentor, but at least be clear on the path that you want, what you want, and put a stake in the ground when you want to get it. I actually worked with a career consulting company years ago. I spent thousands of dollars for the information, and I still am part of their network, and it's more than paid off for itself. And one of the things I learned is that I put together a packet on who I am. I had to rebranded myself. I ended up in, I was told by recruiters, you'll never be able to work in software or technology. And I was making a change. You'll never be able to do it. So tell me never, and I'm going to find a way. So I repackaged and rebranded myself, and I met with my friend Dave, and I had my package, and I showed him everything, and he ripped it to shreds, and he criticized it and critiqued it. And then at the end, I said, well, do you have any contacts at these companies that I can meet with? And he said, yeah. And he gave me the contacts. I ended up getting 3 job offers from his contacts. So do I care that Dave didn't like my packet? No, I was very determined to get in, and I ended up getting a job. And this is in the 90s, late 90s, at IBM. And it was a great experience. And that's when they threw me into, you're going to be in healthcare. I'm like, okay. And here I am. So, don't give up on your dream. Find people who are going to support your dream. Write a goal and stick what are the steps you have to do to get there, and work it. And that's how you can speed it and accelerate it.
I think to what Melissa just said, I think you need to create a plan that's very clearly articulated. Saying I want an executive role, well, what does that mean? Does it mean the fact that I want to be CIO at an IDN? Does it mean I want to be CIO at an academic medical center? Does it mean I want to be, director of population health at a community health center? Define what you want, define your value proposition, and then network like hell, because a lot of those roles may not exist yet, but they might exist in 2 weeks or 2 months or 6 months. I mean, there was a role at a company that I wanted years and years and years ago. It took me a year to land the job. I knew the job, I knew the company, I had the contacts. I just was waiting for that role to open in order for them to hire me. And they basically said, we want to hire you, we just don't have any open positions. So, my wife, who has a very specialized function years ago, there were only 7 places she could work in New England. That was it. And they were all filled. So we moved to Texas because it was the only place that she could find a job. So, you got to have a plan and understand how much you want to work that plan. To Melissa's point, are you going to work it 1 day a week, 1 day a month, every single day? Put the energy and effort in. That time can shrink dramatically. You do it slowly, methodically. It could take you 2 years.
Yeah, and break it down into little pieces, Bob. Like, I've had people, I was like, oh yeah, I'm happy to network with you, and they never call me. Well, if you really want it, then put on your calendar every day, I'm going to call 3 of these people that say they're going to help me, and just make it happen. Like, it's the effort you put in. People say, well, should I join New England Hymns? Am I going to get anything from networking? You get what you put into it. If you're going to sit there, if you're not going to come to you can't you can't win the lottery if you don't buy the lottery ticket. Well, you can't network if you don't show up for the networking event, and and if you don't talk to people. So anyway.
I 100% agreed. Okay, moving on to the next one. So it was mentioned earlier that you don't tell the interview that you can come in and fix their problems in healthcare. What if that was my comment. What if you have some novel ideas and approaches that do things differently to make the changes? How do you communicate that concept to the other side and not coming across as being naive or as being a know-it-all? There's sort of 2 ways of sort of that perspective. So I think, Rich, you probably made a comment earlier, so I'm going to ask you to respond to this one.
Timing is everything in life, right? And so, you want to kind of establish yourself. You want to make sure you really fully understand why things are happening, right? And so it's not a question of, people don't want to hear from you because you're new. Actually, we want to hear from you because you're new. You have a fresh perspective. It's really about, though, as there's a lot to learn, there's a lot to understand, and so it's really. It's timing. Have you delivered anything yet? Have you established that you are going to be a successful candidate, or not candidate, but at that point an employee, so that you have that credibility to do it, right? I think the other way to do it is, I remember years ago, we used to, when we first started implementing Sorian, we used to conduct these huge sessions with tons and tons of people. We had an organizational behavior guy who one time said that my approach to doing things was the Columbo approach, right? And so for those of you who don't know who Columbo was, he was a detective that would ask seemingly like dumb questions, but it was crazy like a fox. He knew exactly where he was going. And sometimes, you ask those questions, even though you already know the answers, just to lead somebody down that road and let that, the greatest people are the people that make you think that even though it's your idea, that it was their idea. And so it's approach and timing and credibility. Sorry.
Hey, just to complement that, being deliberate, I often ask people to solve problems during interviews that we have. Maybe make them generic. And then I was talking to someone recently who was asked to fly out somewhere. It was an executive level position, and to come in do a presentation on I don't know, it might have been like a go-to-market type solution, but companies want to do that. Either wait for that opportunity, or just be overly tactful about it. Would it be okay if I gave you some thoughts on that, and let me make sure I understand it? I mean, those like sales techniques that are, repeat back and let me make sure I understand it. But read the room, understand what the interview is.
And I'll add to that, and on timing is everything, and asking questions. Without looking like you're a know-it-all, especially at the C level, most of the issues are going to be strategic or, real challenges in the operational area. And it's useful, I would find it useful for people to ask about, the interviewee, say, what are your problems? And then you can determine, how you can help them, and then you can give them examples of how you may have solved that problem at your current organization. Because clearly at the C level, they have some problems that they need to fix, or that job wouldn't be open. So that's what you want to find out, and to see if you can do it. They may give you an issue that, oh, we have a problem in this particular area, and you have no experience in it. My advice at that point in time is basically nicely say thank you, and basically you have to know you may not be the person for that job. At the C level, make sure you're the person for the job, or else it'll be short-lived.
So I think we answered, thank Rich. I think we sort of answered this, but if somebody would like to do a quick response, because we are getting close to being out of time. What's the best way to find a recruiter to work with when changing positions? I'm looking for a place to start.
I think we talked a little bit about this, but really, talking to friends, talking to colleagues, utilizing your LinkedIn network and saying, hey, I saw you were here. How'd you get there? Do you know anyone that could tell me a great place to start? I mean, I used to be in finance and now staffing healthcare IT, and putting yourself out there as well, putting yourself on those job boards, opening your LinkedIn profile, saying open to new opportunities, getting your resume out there, because you'll get pings and you'll get calls, and you might, meet a recruiter or two or three that, you really find a connection with, that you can work with and hopefully get your next job at.
Great,
Do recruiters look at that? Do
Sorry?
recruiters look to see if there's an open opportunity? So you will scan LinkedIn to find people that say open for an opportunity?
Yeah, on anyone's LinkedIn profile, there is a tab where you can go into your settings and say open to new opportunities. And from a recruiting standpoint, there's a LinkedIn recruiter, it's called, and we can see that tab. And so you can, it may not be visible to, say, your current boss, but it's visible to recruiters like ourselves.
Brilliant, thanks. So next question, we have 3 more. We'll see if we can get these all done before we clock out. Coming from a clinical and research background, credentials are key. Is this important in informatics and IT? Is it beneficial to come with a portfolio of work? Who'd like to grab that?
So, go on.
Go ahead,
Oh, sorry. Oh, thank you. So again, I think it depends on the level, right? So I was talking with somebody the other day, right? So years and years ago, I got my I did my PMP, right? And as I kind of moved up in the organization, I was managing less and less projects, right? And so, is my PMP still, do I use it the way I originally used it? No. And so, so a friend of mine was saying, well, Rich, should I go for my PM? Well, what do you want to do? Like, at what level do you want to go in at? Because they're expensive, and they're, and they're a lot of work to maintain. So I think it depends on the job that you're going in for. If you're going in for, an individual contributor developer role, make sure you have certifications in the latest, whatever that is, right? But I think for the most part, they're helpful, but at a certain level, I don't know that, I don't know how much.
Yeah, I think to that point, no one has asked me in the last 15 years if I'm certified, because
Well,
I
we know
have
you're
enough experience.
certifiable.
Thank you. My wife would agree with you. But you know, at some level, you know, the expectation is you don't need that stamp. But at other positions like PMP, and I mentioned this to somebody earlier, you know, if they want to get a job in that world, and that's not where they've done a lot of experience, it's certainly going to help a lot because some organizations require it.
I think for clinical informatics, it's important to look at the role that you desire and then look at the folks that have that role and what their certifications are. And I would request a meeting with them to learn more so that you can see, is this really something I want to do, and like learn more about it. And then I would do research on the job market and what is out there and what are the requirements, and see if you can marry those two. And then don't invest in getting that certification until you talk to people that are actually in the role and make sure that's what you want. That would be my advice.
Excellent, excellent. We have one last question. You mentioned earlier about good listening skills. I find it hard to simultaneously listen, absorb, and analyze conversation during interviews and meetings and respond relevantly. Any comments about how to improve those skills?
I mean, that feels like active listening technique. So I'd probably Google them or take a course, obviously. But you know, one technique that you see a lot of people at all levels do, but repeat back, and that certainly helps me. I don't have the greatest memory, and you know, we cover a lot in any meeting, but the interview should be a dialogue, a discussion, and if the interviewer is going on for a while, it's okay to, again, tactfully interrupt and make sure you understand. And I would say in the workplace, like if you're way off, like that's a good sign that you interrupted and you're repeating. People want you to be successful, even in an interview. So yeah, one thought.
Pete, that's great. I agree. You know, something that I often say is, okay, so let me just re-say this in my own words so I know that I understand what you're saying. And I literally call it out that point blank, but I think that shows a commitment to listening to what they're saying and really like understanding it. And then as long as you've done that, you know, it's great if you can follow up with like, oh, okay, so maybe this is a good idea. You know what I mean? Like, or something like that. So, but I think getting like restating what somebody said in your own words really shows that you're listening, that you're actively engaged. And to me, I love that. I love when people do that.
Yeah, I would also ask permission if you could take notes, because I think that helps. Some people are visual, and that can help you and help you remember things and ask questions later.
And to that point, ask permission though.
Right.
Like,
Yeah,
sometimes that is a real turnoff for somebody. If you start taking notes, they're like, whoa, you know, so definitely ask permission.
Right. Yeah. So bring a portfolio with you, you know, something that looks decent, you know, leather bound or something that looks like it's leather. Just don't bring a piece of scrap paper to start taking notes on, because that's not going to look quite so professional. You want to act like you would if you were working for the organization and running a meeting. And you know, that's what you would do if you were working for that organization. And I think, Melissa, you're 1000% correct. Don't assume that they're going to be comfortable, and say, I think it would be very helpful for me if I could take some notes so I can remember the comments that you made and respond to them. And you know, not that I'm trying to take trade secrets away from you.
I just asked very briefly. I just say, would it be okay if I took some notes? I just want to make sure I'm fully present, and would love to make sure I don't miss anything. And people usually just say sure. And if they don't, that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So we are now 2 minutes past. I have an entire page of questions that I was going to ask this esteemed panel that we didn't get to, because you guys asked some great Q&A, you know, during the other two panels. And I think that was done extremely well. It has been an honor tonight to have my friends with me. This was great. I really do appreciate it. I'm going to turn it back to Liza for any final comments that she'd like to make. And I just want to say thank you to my friends.
Bob, I know we're over time, so I'll keep it brief and just want to thank everyone for their participation in the question and answers, and for the panel for sharing their infinite wisdom with everyone. So thank you, and we'll see you all again for our next After Dark in January.
Thank you
Great.
for having me.
you,
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you, everyone.
Happy
Thanks,
holidays.
guys. Have a great night.
Thank you so much.